Well, speculation is growing over how much longer the Ukrainian capital can hold out against the Russian invasion. But with the conflict now almost 3 weeks old, the strength of the Ukrainian resistance has surprised many commentators. Colonel Liam Collins is director of the Modern War Institute in New York and professor at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Colonel Collins, welcome. What have the last few days shown us about the Russian campaign, and tell us about the Ukrainians' ability and their extraordinary defense?
Yeah, I mean, what it's shown is Russia's cyber electronic warfare information operations are not what we thought they were. At the tactical level, I think Russia's performing as I expected. I mean, I was there as an advisor for 2 years helping Ukraine reform their defense establishment, and Ukraine's performing how I thought, right? At the tactical level, they're going to outperform the Russians. They're better trained, right? They empower their junior leaders, so they're fighting a much better fight at the tactical level, but they're facing an overwhelming force with the Russians there.
And are we able to speculate on whether Kyiv will fall, and if so, how long that's going to take?
I mean, war is inherently difficult to make predictions for, but I would say it's not a matter of days. It's more like weeks, months, or maybe never. Russia doesn't want to enter the city. If they enter the city, they're going to face tens or hundreds of thousands of volunteer fighters and expose themselves. They'd rather sit on the outside of the city, continue to bombard it from their relative safety. But I think ultimately they're going to be forced to do some kind of a major offensive operation because they're eventually going to exhaust their supplies and have to make a push to make some kind of gains. But it's going to be a real challenging fight when and if they enter that city.
To what extent has Putin underestimated Ukrainian military resistance?
Yeah, without a doubt, he completely underestimated them. The Ukrainian people, their will and their resolve to fight, he thought they'd welcome them with open arms. He miscalculated that. He miscalculated the capability of the Ukrainian armed forces. They've reformed significantly since 2014. They outperformed the Russians in every tactical fight and every tactical engagement with them. And Ukrainians are better armed with Javelin weapon systems, other anti-tank weapon systems, Stinger missiles, these other capabilities that can inflict and take down aircraft and vehicles that they couldn't in 2014.
Ukraine has pleaded with the international community to come up with a no-fly zone. NATO has been unequivocal with its refusal for that. Given that, what kind of support does Ukraine now need from the West?
You don't necessarily need a no-fly zone to have a capability against the Russian aircraft, right? So giving them more Stinger missiles to be able to take down the aircraft themselves, instead of giving them MiG fighters, which are going to be extremely vulnerable, expensive aircraft that can be taken down on the airfields or in the air, providing them more armed drones like the TV-2 drones that they had from Turkey at the beginning of the war, those kind of capabilities that can then impact Russia's air force and interdict Russian targets on the ground. So I think aid in that way, and then again, as some of the Germany and others are looking, stop depending on Russia for its oil and natural gas to really cut off that wartime economy for them.
Can you tell us a little more about that? I mean, in what sense might this be won militarily, and in what sense might the pressure of international economic sanctions strangle the Russian military effort?
I mean, oftentimes that's more of a long-term game in terms of choking off the effort, but given that it seems like the supplies are relatively low and they're constantly having to push more supplies to the front, and then bringing in Syrian fighters or private contractors demonstrate the war is not going well and they're not capable of an extended fight. And so I think anything you can do to choke them off will impact that ability, because they still have to pay contractors and other things. So the fight's no doubt going to be won at the tactical level in Ukraine by the Ukrainians, but these efforts can all support that.
What about the timelines? Is this going to go on for months or years?
Wars always go on longer than people think. I think the intense fighting is going to go on for at least months, and depending on what kind of a negotiated agreement can last, then it can go on for years, like the Donbass has been going on for years, right? Low-level fighting, but that's been going on for years unresolved. So I would expect it to most likely go on for years unless we can get a positive settlement.
How important has the story of morale been in this invasion? People talk about the Ukrainian defenders having extraordinary morale, and the Russian side, erroneously or not, lacking morale and motivation. Is that a factor here?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, in warfare, people too often focus on capability, right? Counting tanks and airplanes, and they forget about will and resolve, right? You can go back to the French in Algiers, right? Wars all over the world, and people don't really, they often underestimate will and resolve because it's hard to measure. But you could have seen this, right? In 2014, volunteer battalions flocked out to the front carrying their own weapons, their own body armor, their own uniforms, forming entire battalions to fight off the Russian-supported separatists back in 2014. So this is not a surprise at all, and this is exactly what could have been anticipated.
Colonel Liam Collins, Director of the Modern War Institute in New York, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.